what is the position of the Centre of Social Justice? How does the organisation view the criminal justice system? How it's changed? What's good? What's bad? And what do you think needs to be meaningfully reformed?
Yeah. The sentencing review has brought us to the front. The sentencing review came about because prisons are full. You've probably seen, the pictures. So I live quite near Wandsworth Prison. Seen the pictures of people drinking champagne next to their Ferrari outside Wandsworth Prison with early release. It doesn't look good. So some sort of sentencing review was needed. Sort of drawing out quickly into the big picture, what's prison for? Essentially, first thing is public safety. The one thing it does do is get people off the streets. But then it's also about punishment, and it's about rehabilitation. And each of those three really matters. And so you have these sort of conversations which become really binary really quickly of, prison works or prison doesn't work. Actually, as a public safety thing, if we have 1 million murderers, I want 1 million murderers in prison because they are a problem for public safety. And we need to be really clear on that. If someone is not safe to be let out among the rest of us, then let's keep them away. But then there are these grayer areas. Like, where are the less serious offenders, the people who probably aren't a danger to the public? Are they still ending up in prison? Probably, yes, because we don't have a lot of creativity. And so looking at the sentencing review, one of the things we were looking at was, by all means, build more prisons if people are dangerous and need to be in prison. But at the same time, can we be a lot more creative about community sentencing, about what we do? Because at the moment, we sort of say either you go to prison or you go out in the community. You might get a tag and the probation service might be around, but we'll see. Can you put much more conditions on community sentencing and make it harder as well? So people who might get a suspended sentence are now getting a proper community sentence where there will be various conditions around what they can and can't do, people they can and can't meet, alcohol monitoring, drug monitoring, drug rehabilitation, all these sorts of things. So, the central question of that is, can we just be a bit more creative about making sure people are punished, the public is safe, and people are rehabilitated? And if you're doing those three at once, what can we think about? And I'm very drawn to the extreme international and historical examples, not because I think we should do them, but because they were much more creative. So going back into the mists of time, I did a classics degree, and I remember learning about Athenian democracy. And there's a passage, so there's a comic writer guy called Aristophanes, and he wrote a play, and in it there's this description of a guy who gets a radish stuck up his backside, a sand radish, because he committed adultery. And I'm not advocating that we sanded radishes up the backside of people that commit adultery, and that was, it was within a comedy. But one of the sort of principles they had there was sort of public humiliation of people that do things that ruin the core. And I'm not sure that I want public humiliation either, but I want a lot more creativity about how we sentence. So ultimately, it's really poor that for hundreds, if not thousands of years, basically it's either we lock someone up or we don't lock them up. There are a million shades of grey underneath in between that. And yes, the most dangerous people, absolutely, regardless of the numbers, lock them up. But at the other end, you've got people who really aren't a danger to the public. And I think it's something like, is it 1 in 9 or 1 in 8 prisoners go into prison now without a drug problem and come out with a drug problem. So for someone who is not a danger to the public, we're often putting them there and then making them a danger to the public because they're not to feed their drug habit. Can we be a bit more creative about how we do that without necessarily inserting sanded radishes into the backsides of our population? There must be things we can do.
As amusing as it might be, I would certainly be making sure I had no cause to be collared if I knew a radish was going up the back passage, maybe even publicly. Lingering on that topic for a moment, Ed West has written quite a lot about this on his Substack. It pops up on his Twitter as well, where he looks at crime rates within the United Kingdom and the state of neighbourhoods. That's that broken windows theory, that things get bad and then all of a sudden it brings more crime. But effectively, what he is usually pushing is, look, there are actually quite a small number of people that just commit a shed load of crimes. And if you just focused on getting them in jail, and if they are repeat offenders, put them in jail for a long time, even if they're small, they seem small, but they're house burglaries, they're things that then make a whole neighborhood live in fear. Actually, we ought to start thinking about putting people down for much longer if they have got a long record. I'd like to get your view on the conversation on the death penalty, which has come out into the open. I think initially you found it in response to Axel Radicubana and the Southport murders. But I also know Peter Hitchens, the conservative journalist, has written about this in his books for years, saying when we got rid of the death penalty, we got rid of the deterrent for heinous crimes, and now we see lots of heinous crimes taking place. And he recently did an interview with Freddie Sayers on Unheard, talking about should we bring back the death penalty. He made the case for it. What do you think the level of deterrent ought to be based on what we know about repeat offenders? I'm not suggesting burglars need to be murdered, but those who are committing very serious crimes, whether it's the rape of children, murder, these kind of things. Where do you think society is on that question at the moment, and where do you think think tanks like yours are?
Yeah. So starting at the beginning of that, there is this slightly apocryphal statistic that I can never find the source of, but says something like 6% of families commit 50% of crime. So absolutely right. It is really focused crime. And you find that there are communities that are absolutely blighted by it and some that get away without any. So it's right to say that there are some people who are doing a lot of crime. And actually, we talk about reoffending. There are some people now who are sort of 50, 60, 70, 80 times reoffending. And it's often drug related. Driving an addiction, it might be sort of theft and burglary and things like that. But it is repeat. In terms of how strict we're being, I remember speaking to a head of prisons. This would have been probably about 10 or 15 years ago now. I'll keep it vague so you can't identify them. But and they were saying that they could reduce reoffending to zero. Like they had a plan to reduce reoffending to zero. And it was if you commit a crime, you get locked up. That's it, never released. And his point was there is always going to be a balance here. There is always going to be a really difficult balance between just locking people up and throwing away the key and saying how much is reasonable. And that goes from the very minorest of crimes right to the most major of crimes, that we're going to have difficult conversations about where the balance is. In terms of when you get to the really hard end at the death penalty, I mean, I'd say that's something that the CSJ has never done any work on, really. I don't know if we would. But from a personal view, applying the principles, the idea that no person is salvageable worries me a bit. That actually a lot of the principles on which we work at the CSJ is on that second chance, that third chance, that actually you can change, that you can get a job, that you can succeed at school, that you can come out of prison and contribute. And the principle of you're done slightly worries me, even if it might, to be honest, there are some people I meet and I think, yeah, you're done. But to have that as a principle by which we run the country would be a slightly concerning one for me. And so I would personally keep that off the table and think more about those principles of what can be done for this person. That said, there are absolutely cases of people who I would say put them in prison and don't let them out again. I think there are some really clear cases of that who are just a danger to the public. But it is that danger to the public side that is really important to remember, not just that you are irredeemable and awful, but it is you're in prison because we need to keep you separate from the rest of the population.